really worked out a good job. So the next time that I get through India and Baba says, have you started contacting a publisher, I simply said, no, we'll probably publish it in-house, but we've got a terribly good printer that we're working up in Japan. And then I said something that my subconscious said had to be said, but when it got said, I just felt sick about it. I said, yes, we've got this publisher and this printer in Japan, Bob, but I don't know what good it's going to do. I don't know what good it's going to do. Did you hear what I said? What I said to the avatar? I don't know what good this project that you initiated with me and you feel is important is going to do, because I don't think it's going to be a good project. This is essentially what I said to Bob. And as soon as I said it, I just felt sick about it. I didn't know how I could possibly step my foot into that mud puddle. But here I was, splash. So, predictably, and I said, God, excuse me, good heavens, what did I just say to the avatar? And predictably, Bob sits up in his chair. And he said, what did you say, Don? Suddenly gone hard of hearing. So I said, Bob, I don't know what good it is going to do. And he said, what do you mean by that? And he didn't say it challengingly. I know I jutted my chin out when I mimicked Bob, but he didn't say it challengingly. What do you mean by that? And really, he began, I have never seen this look come over Bob's face, and what happened to it in the next few minutes. And he looked a little old, he looked tired, and he looked sad. What do you mean by that? And so I knew that I had to pursue along. Now, this was getting into the days when people were starting to say, with some disillusionment or some, what should I say, adamant position already taken up, they were starting to say that words, logic, philosophy are not of any help on the path, but they are a positive barrier, a detriment to progress on the path. And that's gotten thicker and thicker and thicker, and people say it isn't that, it isn't that, it isn't that, it is this, and all of the rest of it is trite, and it is all an impediment on the path, so you've got to get rid of it. In other words, Mananash, annihilation of the mind, means everything associated with mental processes. You've got to get rid of it. This isn't what Baba said, incidentally, about Mananash, but I'm going to read you what he said in a few minutes. So, I explained this to Baba, and as I'm talking about this, Baba was just being so much a human being in front of me. He looked sad. He looked old. His cheeks looked a bit hollow. He looked a bit gray to me. And I've never seen Baba look like this. It just drove a sword right through my heart as I watched him. And so then Baba said another thing, and he said it so with very delicate hand motions, and Harry said it in a very sad tone. And do they say this about my words? Now, how would you feel if the avatar said that to you, with the things that you've experienced around? And I knew I had to go the final step in this particular conversation. So I said, yes, Baba, I just have to say that I think some of the most magnificent lovers and devotees of Baba even, on occasion will say, I've never read a word that Baba has written. And, when some of the people that I love most in this world, I have to say, have said exactly this to me. I don't jump up and down and get excited. I just let them know I don't agree with them. They know I don't, because they know how much I've worked on Baba's words and how important I feel they are. But this is what Baba was asking to be laid out on the table. And so I had to say exactly what I had heard on a number of occasions. So when I say yes, some of the most wonderful devotees of Baba also say, I've never read a word that Baba has written. So then Baba, really, I've never seen Baba later or before looked like that. It was just as if all of the woes and the weight of the world were on his shoulders. So he turns away from me, and for only the second time that he ever did this, turned directly to Arish, and he is gesturing, and Arish is responding in Gujarati. They do this for 10 to 15 minutes. It was a long one. They have never cut me out of a conversation for that length of time without allowing me some explanation, at least of where they're getting with the difficult subject. So finally, Bob turns back, doesn't look at me, but more in my direction, and Eric says, Don, I'm going to try to explain to you what Baba has just said to me. So he says, it is difficult for me to put into words exactly what Baba has said. And Baba is not completely satisfied with the words that I will have to use. But the general gist of it is, Baba wants you to know that when he gives words carefully handled in the manner that he has had me explain to you twice, in other words, how he gave out God speaks to Arish, when he does it in this fashion and corrects it carefully himself, then he does something like hanging an atom bomb of spiritual energy onto each word that he gives out. Point number one. Point number two, if my devotees will work then with my words, given in this fashion, understood, they will automatically absorb a certain proportion of this spiritual energy, even if they have not understood intellectually one word that they have read. They will still absorb it. And this will be of key importance in their own spiritual ongoing on the path. Then Baba does a little bit more gesticulating, looking very, very tired, really, as if all of the woes of the world were right there on his shoulders at the moment. And Baba points his finger at me, and Arish reads to me what Baba has just gesticulated. He said, and Baba wants you to know, Don, that it is your responsibility to explain to my devotees what I have explained to you today. That's important. Boy, when the avatar points his finger and looks like that and says things like this, you gotta do it. You gotta do your best. So this is something which is, let's say, the fourth R, responsibility. That's what that's about. That's your and my responsibility. And we've got two responsibilities, actually. One is to work with his words. He underlined twice to me the word work. And that doesn't mean sit around and just be happy about it. Work is work, isn't it? And that fits into just about everything that I know. Is that you back there, Ken, or what?
Yes. In going through Joyce's things,
what's that?
In going through some of Joyce's things, I found, I think it was on a Baba card, something from way back when, I read, so I won't say it's Baba, but I read it, responsibility is freedom. And it just...
That's a terrific connection, isn't it? Bless your heart, Ken, for bringing that up. Responsibility is freedom. Because you know, when you do take on the responsibility and you work at your responsibility, you really feel free in your own heart. That's when you yourself feel freest. So, at any rate, that was the end of that particular conversation with Bob. What would you like, Chris?
What year was it you had that conversation with Bob?
Well, let's see. We are in the latter part of the working out of the re-editing of the discourses. This is after God speaks. It is after also listen to humanity. So the new edition of the discourse, I suppose it was latter part of the 50s, wasn't it, when that came out? All three of these happened between 52 and late 50s. So a lot went on in this particular period. Pardon?
It just seems the most important thing, one of the most important things that you have given, you have fulfilled as Baba's wish. That was your responsibility. And it is our responsibility to take this really to mind and heart. I mean, I can't myself, I've always really been interested in reading God Speaks. It was one of the first things Father told me to do. But this has just it's more than just God Speaks, though, isn't it, John? It's the spiritual energy of His words that are published and manifested in His writings. So that when people are very apathetic about reading Bob, I believe it is one of the greatest faults that we can have is that kind of apathy. I can't think, I mean, it's, you know, in thinking of imitations, prayer repentance, and what are foremost of our shortcomings, I should say apathy is one of what is the word they use in the Catholic world? This is another word for that, whatever it is. It's just this laziness.
That's the word I was tempted to use.
Yeah.
But I know I can be awful hard-hearted at times.
But it's such a gift, such a potential that Bob has given us. It's just amazing. You've given us, Bob, in short, you've given us a weight of His grace that is priceless. Thank you.
Well, this is what I feel Baba made indelibly clear to me, and that is we have a responsibility to work with what He put so much trouble into. He didn't do it for nothing. And He said so clearly what our spiritual heritage is that comes from it.
Spiritual energy. What else do you want? Just want that.
Well, that's what He says He hooked. So this is why I felt that when I began to wonder what His third bridge after the mandala began to disappear is, I said to myself, Baba told me clearly what is the heritage that is available to us through His Word. So this is why I say MeherBaba's Word is a principal load-bearing member of the third bridge. But I don't pretend to myself or anybody else that it is the only thing that contributes. There are other things. But it has a central role to be fulfilled. Now, incidentally, you were talking just a little bit about, let's say, it reminded me of this earlier thing that we were talking about way back in before we began, and it sounded, I'm sure to you, that, well, what's Don tooting his horn about? Bob is saying he's an almost perfect balance between the head and the heart.
Yes.
And I think that fits in here. So let me tell you just a little bit more about that early thing that came up and how it came up. On two separate occasions, when just Erich and Bob and I were sitting in Mondeley Hall, working on some of the mechanics of these various editing projects, suddenly Bob broke off. First time he suddenly looks at Erich and said, you know, Erich, I think Don is just almost a perfect balance between head and heart, don't you? Erich looked sort of surprised and he says, oh, of course, yes, Bob. And so I just thought to myself, well, that was a beautiful statement, but Baba, I know you well enough to know now that you're trying to get my head out on the chopping block and you're getting my ego to rise here so you can chop it. So I dismissed it. I said, I'm not going to be taken in by that one. Pretty wise guy, you see.
Been chopped more than once.
Well, it's been chopped a few times. Quite right. He's been observing, hasn't he? So, I just immediately forgot it. I wasn't going to be taken in even by the avatar. So then we go on a few months and a few more months, maybe it was 2-3 years even, and all of a sudden again, exactly the same situation, exactly the same words. And this time, I was old enough to know there's something besides the ego that Bob is working out, because by that time, I had found out that it was terribly, terribly rare for Baba to repeat himself in something. The only other time that was marked was when he had Harish twice tell me exactly how God speaks, had been dictated by Baba through Harish and back and corrected by Baba. Terribly important. So I said, no, Baba's trying to do something. And it's been gradually through the years that I have realized that Baba would do that on rare occasion with me when he was trying to say, no, I'm going to say this twice to you, so you will remember this is something that Baba did to plant it deeply in your memory. And I want to tell you what that memory finally did for me. What he was saying to me is, someday, Don, there will be such an imbalance between the head and the heart that people will then have to get it back into balance. And the history of this is to me one of the most important things that I think I've observed in Baba's ministry. Do you remember when, in I think 2 or 3 places, Baba outlines to us the various different key things that the avatar has to do? I mean, obviously the first is when Dharma decays, he comes back in order to renew the truth. That's the great big central thing that he does. And he does this, he gives a whole push to creation and so on. But again, I remember very clearly at one point where he describes the fact that each time the avatar comes into the world, there is almost always a great big imbalance between 2 opposites, which are important, that their balance be maintained. So I began thinking to myself, well, when I was in my adolescence, one of the things that struck me again and again and again was how many of my young companions were simply starved for human love. Somewhere or another, their relationship with parents didn't work well, or somewhere or another they'd been tossed into the doghouse for years and years. And more and more and more and more, I was around people who were just horribly starved for simple expression of human love. And as I saw the hippies starting to look, I said, this is what it is culminating in, where a whole generation practically is tossing over parental relationship because it has become so meaningless and so fruitless for them, so unsatisfying, not satisfying. So I simply said to myself, this makes sense, because if I have ever seen something where a human being has dished out just constantly enormous quantities of love, it has been Baba himself. People would just be overpowered by the enormous love that he would express. And so I sort of looked back in my knowledge of history and I said to myself, well, this makes sense. If Christ had given out the avatar gift of love, certainly there was quite a long time where there was something called the age of chivalry. And certainly everything that I learned from an extraordinary history of medieval history was that the age of chivalry, even when they had a war, if a few knights got killed off, everybody was sad and wept about it for days afterwards. So even the wars at that time were amazingly humane, if you could call it that. But that was about the beginning, where a few of the scientists that were coming along, the Galileos, Keplers, Newtons, and so on, began studying nature and phenomena, and turning up laws, which then in turn could be applied back into our human living and making it simpler and more comfortable. So we have this whole technological age and the machine age, and being able to handle things to make life more comfortable. And that was such a tremendous challenge and produced such obvious results. Everybody was paying more and more money for it. So the human aspect of relationship was increasingly throttled, and just necessarily a lot less energy and attention put into just plain human relatedness and love. And so this certainly, I've been educated in science, I believe in it, but I also have to see how much time and energy has to be put into it. And I've seen families absolutely almost sucked dry by the amount of time and energy that had to be put principally by the husband into the fields that were necessary to maintain this and push it ahead. So I just saw that over a period of several hundred years, the balance between head and heart had been terribly unbalanced. And if the avatar does what I was certain Baba had said the avatar has to do, that was certainly the big unbalance that he had to do. And I saw Baba do that. And I saw how tremendously effective what he was doing was. And then I saw how the Mandali operated, who were imbued with the warmth and the humaneness and the wonderful qualities of Baba himself, and they maintained it for another 30, 40 years. And so I just came to the conclusion that despite the fact we are now in what everybody regards as a crisis-ridden age, I certainly, as I look back over my life, see a tremendous difference in the balance between, let's say, the head and the heart. So, but I also see that now we're getting into the age where people are starting to say, forget the head, it is a terrible business, it is an obstruction on the path, and it's all heart and only heart will do it. Baba didn't say that to me. And if you will note, when you read through the discourses, the discourse on love, the second page, has 3 paragraphs devoted to what happens when there is an disbalance, an unbalance between the head and the heart. Too much head, it doesn't work. Too much heart, it doesn't work. It is only when the two are equilibrized that he said, then human consciousness is precipitated to a state of superconsciousness. So how many people quote that from the discourse on love? How many people look at, anybody got God Speaks around?
Right here.
Yeah, all right, if you look in the little Roman numeral, I think it's 38, isn't it? What do your notes say it is? There is an address that Baba gives on the left-hand side, where he's talking, I came to do this and that and tell you.
36.
36? Can you see little Roman numeral 36 left-hand side?
No, this
The little Roman numeral. If you can't find it, I'll tell you what it is.
Try
36.
just getting on the end.
Let me let Dawn find it, because you know
John,
this like the back of your hand.
John, is it the one that starts up right and up comes with everything coat? That's on Little Roman numeral 35 and one after.
All right, we better
Looking
look.
at 8.
All right, he says, take a look at 8.
Right opposite the word God speaks.
I don't have a little Roman 8.
It only goes up to 35.
All right, so how are we going to look at 35?
That's where I
I would like to,
You said the discourse on love is in, you've got the B-Y-I-R.
They have different editions.
it is. Now this is a different, oh, this is Balaji's edition here.
And over here, where's the blend?
Well, let me tell you what it says. Baba says, I've come to do this, I've come to do this. One of the things he says there is what everybody quotes, to string all of the religions and philosophies on one string like a string of pearls.
Yeah.
And, all right, okay, can I see
This
this
is the
sweetie?
Sufi one. This is the Sufi one.
Okay. There we are. He says, I shall bring, before he says I shall revitalize all religions, bring them together like beads on one string. Just before that he says, I shall bring about a happy blending of the head and the heart. Nobody ever quotes that. Nobody ever quotes that. They quote the next sentence because it sounds philosophically so lovely and acceptable. But it's not popular now to talk about an equilibrium between this and that.
That's right.
And yet Baba said that twice to me to plant it in my memory. And he says it clearly in the discourse on love. So I just had to say to myself, Baba was saying to me, look Don, one day certainly you will observe where the balance then starts tilting too far in the other direction, where they're decrying this. When he told us in Mandali Hall that his avatar gift was that of intuition, he said, it will be used in all of the disciplines, including the sciences and the mechanical, the architectural, etc. And he said, this does not mean that when intuition is used as the principal tool, that reason will be discarded. It must be used to check the answers that are gained by intuition. How can you be any clearer than that? Even when intuition functions fully, it says got to be backed up and checked by reason. You use your intellectual processes. And here he says, a happy blending of the head and the heart. Not an unhappy one. Not kicking out the one and the other one is saved. Not at all. A happy blending. So let's pay attention really to what the avatar tries to tell us and not block it too much if we can.
Is that Roman numeral 50 in that edition?
Well, so it is actually in that same Balaji edition, isn't it? Yeah.
But is it Roman numeral 50, did you say?
No. It's on, this is the Sufism, latest Sufism reedition, not the one that Balaji did in India.
No?
No. It's after you finish the Roman numeral 35, it's the next page.
After 35.
How much of the third bridge is available for the Indian-speaking people?
Well, okay. That's awfully good one. Could I do his first? Is that all right? Yeah. Say it again.
How much of the third bridge, Baba's cards, words are available for the Indian-speaking peoples of the earth?
Okay, this is one of the most important things that's going on right now, as a matter of fact. A couple of years ago, just after I finished off the God Speak seminars in the United States, I did 3 of them in India: Bombay, Hyderabad, MeherBabaLibrary. And in each city, after the 2 days had been finished, and the local bigwigs were sort of saying, well, this has been a lovely time, it's wonderful to be able to consider Baba's words and discussing amongst us, and so on. Everybody's being polite and saying, Don, thanks for coming, and so on. And then always, in each of these 3 places, after this protocol has been observed, there would be one of the persons in those group of congratulators who would say, but it is so sad that there are millions of people who love Baba who are not able to read one single word that he has given us because they cannot read English. And so, I've been starting to become aware about 2-3 years before that, when I was at the trust office and asking about this work translated into such and such a language. No, it's never been done. And that work translated into that language. Well, it was done, and it was edited, and now it's out of print, and nobody's been able to get it for the last 30 years. On and on and on. This is not criticism of anybody, and it is certainly not criticism of the trust. There are too many good, solid workers in the trust. But it is an extraordinary negligence that is gradually accumulating. So when we went over, after remember, I said, when Baba does something to me twice, I say, have a care now. Because this is Baba's way to communicate that something important is here, and wake up and see if something shouldn't start to happen about it. This is my rule to myself. And so when this had happened to me 3 times, I said, this is important. Now, Balaji from Hyderabad was around in MeherBabaLibrary when it had accumulated its 3rd uttering. And so I said, Balaji, we just got to do something about this. This is what has happened. And Balaji said, well, I know more or less, Don, but this is a very, very delicate issue. And he explained a little bit the way the different translations had gotten blocked by this, that personality conflict, this negligence there. And the history is a long one, and it's almost a heartbreaking one when you add it up statistically. But what the end of the story is that millions of Baba's devotees have never read a word that Baba has written because they can't read English. They love him, but they have got none of his words to back it up. So we just said, well, obviously this has got to have some work done on it. So within a year, a small group of key people, Telugu, Marathi, Hindi, Gujarati, have been put together. And I must say that I think three of the key people involved in this have been Balaji, who's got the imagination, the energy, and the dedication. Pratap Ahir, many of whom you know, and who's head now of the Pune group. He's the head of the Marathi group, and he's got 3 terrific sons. To me, they're the modern Badajanji family, quite frankly. And then the third one is Cyrus Kambata in Bombay. And these 3 people have put together and are rapidly coalescing into a working group. We have just finished spending 2.5 weeks in early August in India, the first part of which was dedicated to, they said, Don, you've gotten a lot of involvement over the course of the years in publishing and distribution, and we terribly lack any sort of elements of distribution. I have to finish the story, excuse me. So we have done our very, very best to start putting together, oh, marvelous.
That's how he's doing it.
Putting together a committee that will function and operate in these fields, and they are starting to do wonderful work. At the same time, we went around trying to find any of the people who are now 80, 90, 100 years old and see who all's available and what they remember going back into the early days with Bob. And again and again and again, it just turned up absolute gold. I just give you one typical example of it. I met for the first time, and it was difficult to arrange, Deshmukh's widow, who's in her mid-90s, and her second son was with her. And we were talking about this and that and the other thing, and she was saying, well, you know, my husband and I did a Marathi translation of the discourses. I said, no, I've never heard that. And so the son drags it out, and we find that, yes, it was done long ago, but if it was ever printed, it hasn't been printed in decades. And so we have got, by the Deshmukhs, the Marathi translation. The whole story of how Life at Its Best was done came out of Meherwan Jessalwala. We were pressing him, did you get around any of the things that Arish and Bobby did? No, I wasn't in on that, etc., etc. He said, oh, now, wait a minute. I was sick and I had to come for a special month back to Marizod, and Baba had just given Arish the job of putting the material together for the 1956 voyage that he was going to make to the West. And he told us to do this and that and so on and so on. And that was what became Life at Its Best. I thought I was close to this thing. I would have sworn that Ivy Deuce told me that both Beams and Life at Its Best were her compilation of what came from our correspondence with Baba editing God Speaks. But no, it turns out that certainly Life at Its Best was not. Baba said, to these various different groups, I've given addresses, and we have put those addresses in such and such a folder. And I want you to take that folder, Arish, and put together some things, and we will make a more complete story out of it. But use that as the basic beginning material. Arish says to Meherwan, I don't have time to do this. You're here, you don't have anything to do. You do it. And Meherwan says, I've never done anything like that. I can't do it. And Arish says, do it anyway. So it gets done, and then Baba goes over it and said, this is absolutely perfect. Embellishes it, goes over it word by word with him. What does that say to you?
Life at
The
its
same way, this is life at its best.
That's Meherwan,
And
Arish's brother.
this is Arish's brother. This story has never come out before.
Next issue.
And so this is hot off the press news and some of the most important thing we've ever found out. This is a major addition. Now, what would you like?
Brave? Brave.
Prayers. All right, let's go into it, because let's move.
Braille.
That's
Braille.
language.
Braille.
Oh,
Braille, B-R-A-I-L.
I have nothing to do with the Braille myself.
You have nothing to do, but what about getting something done in Braille?
All right.
That they know about Baba.
I would simply say to you that I think anybody who has got a good project get Baba's words out in their original form.
A lot of it has
Should
been
be
done
done.
in New York.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
I was in touch with them.
But since I thought it was prayers, I go for a moment into prayers. May I have the floor for a minute? All right, let's do the prayers, and I want to talk about the song from the New Life, because this is dead necessary, terribly important. Certainly, I've seen so many times at the end of a day with the mandali, when Baba, no visitors around except the mandali. I was let in through the under part of the door. And Baba goes out at the end of the day, opens up the two back doors on the mayor's garden. And Baba's at the center, usually at that time leaning on Francis Brabazon's arm. There's a semicircle that is formed like a crescent moon. And Arish is way over at the right end of that. Arish, everybody is silent. Arish reads out the Master's Prayer, the Parvarti Garden. I have seen Baba do that, seen Baba in communion with God in this fashion. To me, there is absolutely no question that both the Parvarti Garden and the Prayer of Repentance have exactly the same force in history as does God Speaks itself. And the third thing that I think is terribly important, it has a fascinating story to it, is the Song of the New Life. When I first read that, I said, this is the most incendiary, revolutionary thing I have ever read in our life. So it says things that just really shook me up, and I think we all need to be shaken up by it. So eventually I wanted to quote it in something or another, but I've been aware of the fact that there were two versions of it. One which says, let your garden be destroyed, etc., etc., and the other which says, let not your garden be destroyed. And the let not is from Pergam's The God-Man. And most people feel that's the authoritative version of it. So before going to press with the little thing I wanted to write, I went to Adi Sr., who was still living at that time. I said, Adi, do you know any of the background about the Song of the New Life? And he said, oh yes, Don, because I was here out of the New Life at that time, and Baba gave the original points to Ghani. Ghani wrote up the original points. Does this sound familiar? Yep. Brought it back to MeherBaba. MeherBaba then revised and changed what Ghani had written so it was exactly as Baba wanted it. Baba then had his version sent to me with a further instruction. He said, A, this should be made up as a leaflet and sent out to my lovers around the world. B, get a printer's proof of it and do not send it before you send the printer's proof back to me, and I will recorrect it. This says to me, this is the only thing in existence that I know of that Baba himself corrected twice because he said it was so important. And so Baba himself then recorrected it, and I sent it out to Baba's lovers around the world. So this to me is another incomparably wonderful treasure from Baba. Ken, what did you want?
Let your garden or let not? Let or let not?
It is let. Let's have it destroyed because there's nothing to worry about. You'll reconstruct it with God and it'll be more beautiful than ever.
So the version,
It's in his book.
that's what that's the best thing.
John, did Baba ask you to send back the printer's proof after Purdom had published his book, right?
All right, let's get into that one because that is a terribly important series of back and forth.
5 minutes.
Oh my God, we're really getting it. Thank you, good boy. When Morton's The God-Man came out, life was just a tiny bit more relaxed for a change. So, everybody all set for this one? Because this one is an important one for all of us. I deduced got an early copy of it. I quickly got a copy of it because I knew Burton well. I thought he was one of the most wonderful, sane, down-to-earth, loving Baba lovers that I've ever come across. I feel that way totally dedicated to Baba. Baba had total confidence in Burton, right straight along the line. So Burton comes out with his Remember he wrote The Perfect Master. Did you ever realize that that might indicate that Baba went through a perfect master phase and then became the avatar? We'll go into that another day.
Yeah, but she said, first he said,
Yeah. So here we are with Purdon coming out with the God Man. I read it through and I noticed a few little things that I knew enough from being with Baba when certain things were discussed to know that here and there Purdon made a mistake which probably should be corrected. But I'm not going to correct Purdon, certainly not. And then in the last chapter, Purdon writes from the standpoint of the person who was fundamentally, first of all originally, a Christian mystic, and reinterprets, let's say, Baba's philosophy into Purdon's interpretation of Baba. And here, there were just, page after page of things that just weren't as Baba put them very clearly. So I underlined those. I phoned back to Mercer Deuce and said, I've just been reading this, and do you realize the number of errors there are, especially in the last chapter? And she said, yes, Tom, it's important. And what you just got to do, because you get to see Baba soon, make a list of them, because we must bring them up with him. I did this, brought it up with Baba. And Baba just looked at Eric point after point after point. And he said, but this is important. We've got to have a conversation with Purdon about this. So he points his finger and says, Don, you do it. So I start taking notes. Glenn, sometimes you get stuck with things that are not terribly appetizing. I did not relish the idea of carrying this message back to Purdon, whom I adored, always did. So Purdon meets me and is anxious to have whatever the message is from Baba. Bless his heart. He did not look indignant. He did not look hurt. He was businesslike. He was straightforward about it. I would say about 2/3, 3/4 of the point that Baba was raising with him at that point, he agreed to. He says, yes, I can see how there is a discrepancy or a misunderstanding here. And he boiled it down to accepting most of Baba's points, but there were 6 or 8. Baba goes over them with me, says, take this, what I'm saying, back to Purdon. Then I go back to Purdon. He accepts all of them except one, in which Baba says, Purdon, consciousness is complete in the last animal stage, and it does not expand further or change in the human stage. So this is, Baba says, I made this clear even in the discourses, let alone God speaks, so you should have known it. Purdon said, Don, I respect you. I am sure that you have not made an error in any way, but this I cannot believe until one day I sat at Baba's feet myself. He died before he sat at Baba's feet, but he had agreed to everyone but that point to be changed. I had all of the notes on all of the things that he had agreed to. When I knew that there was a possibility that, let's say, a new edition would come out, I said to people at the Trust, I've got all of these things that we've got to be sure go into a next edition. Everybody said, fine, it's got to be changed. So eventually, of course, Purdon's widow had possession of the rights to his books. He sold The God Man to Kitty and Delia DeLeon. Kitty and Delia DeLeon decided that they would finance a new edition through Shariar. I phoned Delia. Now, this is not attempting to criticize or anything. It's a terribly important work, and exactly what happened is Baba, lover, public property. So I said, Delia, so-and-so and so-and-so. And Delia said, well, this is important. I've got to telephone Kitty and we'll talk it over. Back came the reply from him. Baba was no longer in the body at that point. I think Monty was still alive. Yes. And so they, the owners, said, Don, we've decided that we do not have the right legally. We have bought something from Purdon's widow, intact, and we are unwilling to change one word. So the changes that Baba and Purdon had agreed to were not included in the second edition. At that point, I said to myself, I'm getting old. I don't know what will happen to me. So I sent all of my notes to the trust saying the history of what, where they came from, how they had come about, and that this was a very important matter. I checked with Val a little over a year ago and said, Val, we mustn't let a third edition come out, and maybe you better get those out of the files of the trust so they're ready for a third edition one of these days. And then Val came back and said, Don, we've looked for them, they're lost. So there we are with one of the most important things, of course, related to Bob. Purdom has the stature in the world of letters that he will be regarded as being the independent authority on Baba's life. And we're stuck with where we are. Ed, what did you
Did Bob, when Baba said consciousness is complete in the last human organism, but but self-awareness is not yet there. That's
that you reminds me of the point that Baba brought up, that he and Erich discussed it between them. And after they had talked for some time, Erich came back to me and said, Baba says undoubtedly Purdom has confused consciousness with awareness. Consciousness can be at this level, but how it is used, in what environment, in what degree of complexity in the environment is different. And Purdom, when he said, when I was a little boy, I know how I thought, and I know how I think now, and I know that my consciousness is enormously expanded now over what it was when I was a little boy. Yeah. This is when Baba said he has confused awareness with consciousness. Right. This is a very important point.
What is the last animal form?
Well, some people tell me it's a horse and I get confused. I wish it was a dog myself. Or a canary. Well, that isn't an animal, is it? Oh, I think
Can I go back to the prayers for a second? There's another question that I've heard raised several times.
Now, could you all be quiet for just a moment while we have this last question for today?
About the repentance prayer, and the end of it, where is it the wish or the will?
Well,
and I wonder if you had the insight or...
All I can say is if somebody can straighten me out on wishes and wills, I'll be happy. And I just have to say, each time I read something on it, I get more confused than the previous time.
Well, what did Baba say? When he was saying, when Erich was reading the prayers, which one did Baba say?
I never heard him say the prayer of repentance. That's just it, simply.
We're told that the original was wish, and that when Erich translated it, he mistook and put will in, and Baba never corrected it. But Bao has been spending the last 2 years that he came to America.
That's when I get confused.
And I confused him even more.
I just have to admit to you, Ed, I threw up my hands and said, this is beyond me. Maybe the next life.
But in the prayer, it was originally wish. And
where does he say that? Is it in Lord Maher?
I don't know.